Hey everyone, Matt Schmidt here. One of the questions I get asked a lot is how did you go from what you were doing? How did you go from being like a hardcore scientist working in drug development to this metaphysical like healing practitioner? Well, I'm going to share with you the story and even share some details and stuff that probably a lot of even my friends don't know. So here we go. So it started out when I was really young and there was this big bright white light and I heard, "It's a boy." No, I'm just kidding. No, ever since I was a little kid, like I knew that I had a big mission, big things to do in this world. I didn't know what that was, thought I knew, but turns out that wasn't the case. But in hindsight, it was all perfect in getting me to where I am today. Right. So initially I had a strong pull to kind of follow in kind of what my family's interests were, and also I had this knowing that I wanted to help people feel better. I knew I wanted to help people heal. Didn't really know what that looks like. I also had a strong tie to nature and animals and wildlife. So I initially went to school for wildlife and natural resources, and then as I got into that I couldn't get some of the classes I needed, so I started taking more chemistry classes and ended up really liking those. So then I actually started taking all the chemistry classes, so I just kept adding majors until until I realized I'd been there for like 6 years and I probably should move on. But I ended up graduating with degrees in pre-pharmacy, biology, natural resources, wildlife management, and ended up shifting, and chemistry, and ended up kind of combining all those areas and did my doctoral work in medicinal and natural products chemistry. So that's where we're looking for natural sources to come up with drugs and stuff and treatments for different medical conditions. And that was an area or a way that I could actually tie all these things together and really create something out of all the areas of expertise that I had. So I had actually been doing research for a while even before that, and it all kind of blended together and it was pretty perfect. So that kind of pushed me to look at those things and study those things. I focused a lot with central nervous system disorders, cancer, and with like pain and stuff like that. So it's interesting how that kind of lined up, because it doesn't seem like that would be a carryover to what I do now, but it's actually pretty perfect. So I can understand things now from a different perspective by having a background in this and understanding those things. So I was working like 100-hour weeks in school and sometimes, and just pushing, thinking I knew that was the path. I knew that that's where I was headed, and it actually was. It was perfect at the time. It felt like red carpet used to roll out for me, and then I got to a point where stuff kind of changed. So I had a hard shift out of that path. There was like a catalyst that pushed me out of there. I'll talk about that in another video. But that catalyst pushed me away from that path, and I needed a hard shift out of that in order to do what I do now. And that actually pushed me on that path, on the path that I'm on now. And if it wasn't for that pivotal thing, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. So I kept trying to force it, even though it was pushing me away from that, and I wasn't getting the hint. So I think I applied for like several hundred jobs and maybe heard back from a couple. The ones that I did hear back from, like, "Oh, you're overqualified," or they didn't even acknowledge that they got my application. And this is like during 2007, 2008, when there was already kind of an economic recession. So I was feeling all the pressure from that. I actually went back to the same job that I had in high school just to make money, making toilet paper at a factory. And I was there for a while before I kind of like shifted out of that and ended up, I was having, let's see, try and back up. Oh yeah, so I ended up working for my friend's tree service for a little bit. I was in a transition point. During that time was when I started having all these medical issues. I started having seizures and stuff like that, and that actually pulled me to actually move back home. It pushed me to be back home, which is right where I needed to be. And then I ended up getting a job teaching chemistry and biochemistry at one of the universities. And I didn't actually have a contract. I was an adjunct faculty. So there was really no contract. And I had spent all this time preparing for that teaching role. And then it was like a day before classes started, they called me and told me they weren't going to need me. I was like, oh my gosh, and it was thing after thing after thing like this. And I still wasn't getting the hint that I was supposed to be doing something different. That actually pushed me to just start looking for a job, and I talked to a friend that I went to school with, and she said, oh yeah, we have some openings at my school. Why don't you just come there? So it was actually at a school that was this magical place called Civil Hop School, which was a cool school for all students with special needs. And that was perfect, right where I needed to be. And I went into that job. I thought I was going to be teaching a lot of stuff. I wasn't. I ended up learning all these things about myself, meeting some amazing people, and that was exactly where I needed to be. But without all these other things in place that were like, oh my gosh, why is this happening? I wouldn't have been at that place. So everything pushed me to there, and probably would have been a lot easier to get there if I would have just been listening and following my own intuition and my own insights. But I still got there. Went there the hard way. I like to do things the hard way, apparently. Okay, so that school taught me a lot about myself. It also was like perfect for what I needed at that time. In addition to that, I also met my current partner there. So it worked out that way too. During that time, I was still trying to force things the way that I knew. So while I was there, I was also involved in a project where I was setting up a cancer research center at one of the local colleges. And we had a bunch of researchers on board, all the hospitals on board, and right before we launched it, we lost millions and millions of dollars in funding. And so all the work that went into setting that up was nothing. So it was so frustrating. I was just like, I actually just gave up at that point, which is exactly what needed to happen. So by giving up, it actually caused me to, well, first I gave up for a while and just like, you know what, screw it. It wasn't like I started figuring stuff out then. I just kind of threw in the towel. And that's kind of the point I had to get to, where I just had to like surrender to whatever was going on so that I could find where I needed to get. So that was an important part as well. So don't beat yourself up if you're kind of going through some of these things and some of these things aren't making sense. Sometimes you just have to get to that breaking point, and we all have that point where we're like, this isn't working, I need to do something else. It took me a while to start figuring out what that was, but during that time I met my partner Whitney, my current partner Whitney, and that started, things were already kind of shifting for me without even knowing it, but that really accelerated stuff. So during that time, I actually quit using drugs shortly after we met. It was kind of heading that direction anyway, because old stuff wasn't working. Old everything wasn't working. So all these things are starting to change in my life just by taking a step back and not trying to force it the way that I knew. And that led me down this path of just questioning things. Questioning everything, like, why is this happening? I felt I was very like in victim mode, like, oh, why is this happening to me at that point? But I was still questioning things. I was still like, okay, what the heck is the purpose of this? Why is this happening? And that, though, asking good questions like led me down these certain paths. So I found the work of Aaron Doughty, who's a guy on YouTube. Highly recommend him. He was instrumental in shifting me along this path. Through him is where I discovered the work of Dolores Cannon. Dolores Cannon, one of my early inspirations and the foundation for what I learned to get me started kind of on this professional path. And I also experienced some things. So I had a friend, mutual friend, Lori, who came over, and she put her hands above me, and I could feel energy moving across my body. It felt like I was rocking. I opened my eyes and she wasn't touching me. And I was like, what the hell don't I know? Like, how is this even possible? Like, this is just like beyond me. Like, where was this in my biology book? It wasn't, because we don't talk about that stuff. Okay, but this was definitely real. I felt it. And then I was like, how much stuff don't I know? Like, how much is out there that I have no clue about? Even watching Dolores Cann, some of the videos, she'd be talking about she'd be working with a client in this deep state of like relaxation where they'd be talking about some ancient Egyptian history or something like that. And then she would fly, she'd be working in England, she'd come to the United States and be working with another person, and the other person that she was working with would pick up the conversation where she left off in England. And I'm like, how is that possible? Like, and she just says it so matter of fact, and I'm like, how do I not know this stuff? Like, I get the idea of quantum entanglement and how everything's all connected, but this is like a practical thing that, you know, she's just talking about. She doesn't understand the quantum physics behind stuff, but it's still happening. So that really pushed me to want to experience this. I also just had like this pull that I can't really describe, but it was this pull to experience this. That's when I discovered my friend Tatiana, who became now my life friend, and I had a QHHT session with her, and that just changed my life. So even with everything that I knew about medicine, about the brain, the nervous system, everything, I was still having all my own problems. I was having grand mal seizures about once a week. I was on medication at that point, but before I was on medication, they were weekly. Even the last one I had was like over an hour long while on the maximum amount of medication. So these are kind of a big deal. I was also on 14 medications for things and having all problems with like anxiety, with pain, with my all these labels too, ADHD and anxiety and sleep and everything like that, and then the side effects of those. And I was on like high levels of all like the medications for all those things. So in that one session, first of all, I didn't think this would work for anything physical. I was just amazed at the results. But in that one session, I immediately stopped having seizures. In 2 months, I was off all 14 medications, and I saved like almost $5,000 a month, or $5,000 a year just out of pocket on those medications. And then there's all these other side effects too. Like I lost like 60 pounds in 2 months just from stuff my mind was hanging on to. I used to sleep like 2 or 3 hours a night. After that session, I started sleeping every single night. I didn't even ask about that because like you just get so used to this that you think like there's no other way. You're like, by the time you're almost 40, you're like, okay, this is just how I am. And you almost get to this like, I don't want to really say acceptance, but almost like complacency, like, okay. And the only resolve I had was with the medications, but that wasn't a permanent solution. So all these things started shifting my life. And then I was like, why am I so stuck in my career? Like, I felt like I was trying all this stuff, nothing was working. And it was because I was supposed to be doing this work. And it's the only answer I had trouble like saying, because I'm like, I was arguing in my head. I'm like, there's no way that's right. That can't be right. And turns out it was. The lady's like, just say the first thing that comes to mind. And I was like, fine, I'm supposed to be doing what you're doing. And I was getting an attitude, like it was frustrating because I'm like, there's no way I can see myself doing this. All right, well, then after experiencing it and having this big shift myself, I was able to give this to other people, but I still didn't make that jump. In 2 months or 3 months, I started taking all the classes I needed. I knew that I had to do this, but I had a hard time letting go of my old way of life. Part of it was my old identity. One of the things I told myself in my head was I'm letting these people down by leaving, like moving away from that job, even though like that's what was needed for me at the time. And I actually started having all my own physical symptoms because I wasn't letting go of my old job. So during that time, I actually fell out of a tree, cutting trees. I grabbed onto the tree and hurt my shoulder. And for 5 months, I couldn't raise it up, move it backwards. And then I got the message that I wasn't letting go of my old job. So I was told that probably needed rotator cuff surgery, and that was going to be like the only solution. But once I made that commitment to quit my job, in 30 seconds it completely went away, and it hasn't been back since. So once I listened to that, once I followed what I was supposed to be doing, everything kind of aligned for me. And from there, once I committed, made that, it's like I just haven't looked back. It's like that red carpet was there again, and I was on the path. The interesting thing is, I was on the path the whole time. Looking back on it, they were all important parts of the path, and I wouldn't change any of it. I wouldn't change any of it because it's exactly what I needed at the time. Even though a lot of it sucked, it's exactly where I needed to be, how I needed to experience it, and all of it was perfect for me getting here so I could be in this moment right now. So if you're struggling, if you're going through something and you're feeling that way, just know that it is part of the path and it'll make sense later. There are ways to kind of move through it a little quicker, but it's important to honor where you're at and work through it that way rather than trying to fight it like I did. You'll get there a lot faster. It doesn't have to be a long drawn out struggle. Apparently that's what I needed. And I'm grateful for that, however that looked. All right. So even with that too, right before I quit, I got like a test from the universe. I got offered a job for about double my salary, doing nothing different. All I had to do was switch departments, and I had to turn it down. I said no, and it never felt so good to say no. It was so weird because like all these alarms are going off and all these bells and whistles are like, what are you doing? Like I literally would have had to do nothing different. And I knew that I had to say no, and it felt so good to say no, even though like I didn't have a plan. I didn't know how sustainable this was going to be, if I was going to make it, if I was going to be able to support my family. I didn't know any of that stuff. But I followed that feeling. I followed my heart rather than what my head was telling me. And that was a big lesson for me because it's helped me to start trusting my heart more and trusting that feeling. And now I do a lot of stuff. I don't know why I'm doing it, but I have a feeling like I feel like I should do it. So if that feeling is there, I know to follow it, even if logically it doesn't make sense, because it's always been right. When I look back on it, I'm like, oh, okay, that's why that had to happen. And it's always perfect. So if you're getting that feeling, honor that feeling. A lot of times there's a lot of fear that holds us back, but sometimes you just have to jump and kind of grow your wings on the way down. And when you start doing that, when you start following it, that's where the magic happens. Okay, I was scared. I was scared shitless to make that jump and to follow that. But I also knew that's what I needed to do. Okay. Once you do that, once you commit, like the universe has your back and it's going to follow behind you. It may not look how you wanted it to look, maybe like a little bit in getting you there. Anytime you do something new or switch to something new, there's kind of like that lag period of jumping into something. But really that was a blip looking back on it in the grand scheme of things. And really I was taken care of the whole time. I didn't worry how it looked. I can't let go of how it looked. I kept putting my energy towards that, towards what I wanted. I was treating, even when I had my other job, I treated this like it was my full-time job. And pretty soon, like my brain just kind of took that as, okay, this is your full-time job. And I was able to smoothly transition out of that rather than struggling and trying to do both things. So, yeah, it's been magical since, and I've been able to help so many people because I actually made that jump. So if you're on the fence, if you're going back and forth on something that you know you're supposed to be doing or you feel that you're supposed to be doing, follow it. Follow your heart. It doesn't have to be all or nothing all the time. Like you can ease into some of these things, but start following your heart and start putting energy into that. The universe has to know you're serious. If you're not putting anything towards it, it's not just going to be handed to you. So start putting putting energy towards it, learning what you need to from it, and you'll get there. So, all right, thanks for joining me on this journey, and I look forward to joining you on more videos. Once again, if there's anything that you want to see, feel free to put it in the comments. And yeah, if there's a meditation or anything else you want to see, just let me know, and I can whip something up. All right, we'll see you on the next video. Bye.